Welcome to the last session of the 30 day challenge. Welcome our panelists, Carl, Daniel, Sean. It's great to have you here again. I'm sure that everyone who watched the video of the or recording of their last session, they thoroughly enjoyed it and it was full of gold nugget information. I had a few takeaways myself. It was really good to be part of it. And I look forward to our today's session. So today we're going to run our session slightly different because the nature of the session is all about networking. So we want to put everyone sort of a networking skill into practice. And this can be our sort of a virtual networking event that we try to talk about few skills that can help everyone to present themselves in a networking event, and what sort of a networking option are available, and how we can actually get some value out of going to some networking rather than just going and wandering around. And I'm sure that especially in the data science space, there has been a lot of meetups and pizzas and drinks and beers, and you come out of it and you say, oh, okay, so did I meet someone that actually I remember the name? Or I got a lot of, business cards, but who's who? So we want to talk about a little bit about those type of thing, and then I guess throughout the session I'm going to pose some questions to our panelists Danielle, Carl, and Sean. Everyone else who's also in our audience or in the community, that you can use the chat box in the event, or if you want to post your questions under the event of the art community. So I'll make sure that I ask as many questions as possibly I can. Without any further ado, I'm just going to share my screen more for a sort of an anchoring point, and then we go through them. It's not the sort of a presentation style today. It's more about everyone try to engage and share their experiences and talk more about, what has been your experience in terms of the networking, where it was specifically to the data career or any career networking, or if you actually have an experience that you went to a totally different type of networking, didn't have any sort of plan to target any job opportunity, but it was actually very fruitful, and at the end you managed to maybe sort of shape your current career, or you managed to find some opportunity down the track. So a little bit of a food for thoughts, and with that, I'm just going to share my screen for our new audiences that joined just this session and they haven't been in our previous session. So the sort of the 30 days challenge initially started by initiated by Carl, I should say. So thanks, Carl, for bringing such a interesting topic. And it came about from a huge interest in our community, that a lot of question about how to get a job or how to improve on presenting, marketing, resume. So we thought that it might be actually good to sort of focus all those knowledge and information sharing into a kind of full packed 30 days challenge, and see if you can challenge yourself to pick one or all the topics and see how you can actually excel yourself throughout these 30-day challenge. So believe it or not, it has been only less than 30 days, but we've learned a lot. And I think that's the power of being part of a community, can be pushed to do more and challenge yourself with things that you might have not done in the past. I just, I have to send a Zoom link to some of the community members. So if you can please bear with me a second. Sean, maybe I can ask you to just have a little intro and open the sort of a conversation while I'm looking after this bit.
Yeah, sure. Maybe go to the next slide if you can.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. And I guess this is the last session covering network and maybe some top tips. So I think you put this together, Ria, which I think is great and is not an exhaustive list. there are quite a few different ways to network. COVID has really changed things and turned things sort of upside down. So I think people are finding more creative ways to sort of connect, collaborate, and to work together. And especially in a work environment where a lot of these things are digital at the moment. But I guess in summary, virtually, we've got existing methods through LinkedIn, which is still sort of maintained a high level of usage, usability. And we covered elements of this in last week's session. But I guess within LinkedIn, it is growing into more of a networking platform as well. And that sort of combines your traditional sort of meetup groups as well as masterclasses and webinars with some really good chat functionality. A lot of it can be a little bit broad and not that specific, but I think in terms of where you want to go in terms of a specialization, it is gaining traction. Here's a quick slide on some LinkedIn stats and maybe why you should consider it. So there are quite a few people that utilize LinkedIn. I think there's a stat that was done recently which suggested that 1 in 3 professionals are utilizing that. They at least have a profile, and at least 1 in 20 of those users are recruiters. So we have one of those here today, and I think it's a really great way to get noticed. So if you're looking at finding your next job, or networking with a peer who might be able to recommend a job to you, a good way to get noticed is creating a profile on LinkedIn. I think making sure that you've got at least a profile picture and some basics. Some of that is covered in last week's session. And then I guess traction outside of the normal profile, if you go back a slide, sorry, Priya, is that there are a number of different groups on there as well. So you might find a group that's relevant for you. If not, ART also has a few different groups that you could talk and sort of socialize and work with. There are quite a lot of people viewing different profiles and groups. So if you post something, you're likely to get some traction. I think it's also good to be careful of how the group has been set up. There might be some limitations in how you communicate, and you might get moderated as well. But I think generally they are fairly inclusive and quite open. I think go to the next slide. Within LinkedIn, and it's not just LinkedIn, there are a number of different webinars and masterclasses that you can register for as well, that are typically free. Some of them are paid as well. But this was just a very quick search of data webinars or masterclasses within LinkedIn. You can see a lot of them are online right now. This was taken, I think, yesterday. But there, at any given time, there are dozens of online webinars that you could participate in. And these sort of tend to be one directional typically, but they do allow for some chat functionality and some group sessions depending on the setup. So it might be a good way to at least ask a number of different questions. And if you want to be funny, try to confuse the hell out of the host and see how far that gets you. But I think a good way to sort of get to know other people and different perspectives of a particular specialization. The next slide, please. The other area which I think everyone knows about are meetups. So I think this sort of really kicked into gear, at least here in Sydney, a few years ago. The typical ones that I've attended are the data science meetups. I think Sydney users of R was another one. R is a programming language, and there's another one I attended around data engineering as well. I think, Daniel, you might have attended the data engineering one, and I know Alan Watmore, who I've worked with, also attended that too. But these are really great sessions. Some of them have sort of adapted over the last 6 months, and they've gone virtual. And hopefully they start to have sort of more face-to-face sessions, because they do sort of help people to meet each other and collaborate on a more personal level. Plus there is always pizza and drinks to sort of encourage you along the way. At the end, there's also time for people to network. I think generally virtual sessions, they tend to stop at a certain point and that's it. And that doesn't necessarily give an opportunity for people to talk. Whereas the meetup sessions tend to allow people to linger around and sort of talk to each other. And I think there are some really good benefits to that as well. The next slide, please.
Thanks, John. That takes us to the our Q&A and the next slide.
Great.
For our new audience that just joined, we've got Daniel in the panel as one of our panelists, Carl and Sean. And please post your questions so I can make sure I ask as many questions as possibly I can. But I guess we've got some questions here that I'm going to ask you guys. So going to different networking events, and I may pose it to you, Daniel, and then go around Carl and then Sean. So going to different networking events, what would be your, let's say maybe top 3 tips, just to kind of maybe have it more structured for people who want to take notes and have some sort of a practical information. So what would be your top 3 tips for someone going to a networking event and they want to introduce themselves to, it might be their the person they're talking to might be a recruiter, or it might be a potential hiring manager, or it might be just someone, you know, a peer. How would you introduce yourself?
So did you say starting from me or? Okay, cool. So yeah, I've been to like physical and also virtual, like this one, you know, networking events. And so straight to the point, tips that I would get for people to, like, who are new to, you know, networking events. Depending on the type of events, some of the events might be like a, you know, physical meetup event. So in that case, my tip would be not what you say, but like just simply say hello first. And then if you're a beer person, then you grab a beer and, you know, go to someone who is doing the same. And then the conversation is going to be much more natural, you know, when you have these gestures and, you know, facial expressions. And depending on who I'm talking to, it could be very different, you know, starters. So for example, if you're like meeting a peer who is also like data engineer, for example, then you would obviously just say, hey, you know, I'm a data engineer too, and you know, I work in such and such company, and this is what I do day to day, and how about yourself? So kind of like an interactive sort of mode, and then give other people time to speak, and it's very generic things. I apologize for that if, you know, it's not helpful. But the second thing is obviously with the virtual environment, that's a bit challenging, and mainly because actually in my internet sort of environment, I normally will experience like 1 second or 2 second delays. So my tips would be, like, over the virtual environment, my tips would be, you know, when you're talking to the counterparty, you assume sort of like 1 or 2 seconds delay. So you can wait until someone stopped speaking, and also wait for a further, like, you know, a second or two before you continue. And with self-introduction, that sort of thing, normally I would start with, you know, what company you're working for, what you do, and your industry and things like that. But it's very subjective, and some people are doing very different things, and they're both valid, and it also attaches to what kind of personality you have. I think that's pretty much it for me.
Thanks, Daniel. I put it on Carl, if you can please also have your tips. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess my first tip is all in the preparation. And I guess that all depends on what you want to get out of the actual meetup. So for example, if you're looking for work, you're ideally going to be wanting to speak to either recruiters or hiring managers. If you are going for a project at work and you want to kind of find people who are in similar industries doing similar projects, then you want to prepare kind of who you're hopefully going to be meeting with and who you're going to be speaking with. So the way I would prepare if I was in those situations is I'd look at the guest list. Most meetups have a guest list. And you can look through and you can find these people on LinkedIn, find out what jobs they do, and then that way you can almost make who you're networking with a bit more targeted, because there could be 50 to 100 people in a room and you don't have time to speak to everyone, find out exactly what they do. So in that way, especially if you find them on LinkedIn, you know what they look like. In person, you're able to go up to see them. I think what Daniel was saying about introducing yourself instead of going straight into what you want, it's always good to kind of break that ice first, ask a few questions. Hey, how are they doing? How are they enjoying the meetup? Kind of tell you a bit about themselves. All those kind of nice kind of break the ice questions that aren't kind of straight into the detail, I think is always the best way. And I think when it comes to the virtual side of things, it can be difficult sometimes to I guess speak to people. There could be hundreds of people on there, and you do have the chat function at the bottom of a lot of the conversations. But what I tend to do is I'll kind of be interested in and understand what the meetup is about, go through the chat, and then actually after the meetups I'll kind of pinpoint who I wanted to speak to, and then you can message them via LinkedIn. It's about using that LinkedIn again and just saying, hey, really enjoyed that. I noticed you're on there as well. What did you think about it? And again, you're breaking that ice via LinkedIn first. And then if you want to speak to them, if it's a recruiter because you're looking for work, then you can kind of go into that after. But that'd be kind of my main first point, is all about that preparation. And my second tip, I think, yeah, similar to what Daniel was saying, a lot of these people who go to those meetups are in the same situation as you. They might not know too many people. It's all about just having that confidence to go up to someone and say hello. It doesn't take much, and a lot of the time people are happy for you to say hello to them and probably quite appreciate it, especially if they're there standing on their own. And then I guess third tip, just make sure you are taking notes. If there is a recruiter there, don't be afraid to ask them for their card. If there's someone that you want to speak to after, don't be afraid to say, hey, how about we catch up for a coffee sometime in the next week? It'd be great to see you again and talk in a bit more detail. I think sometimes you don't want to go into a 20-minute conversation at a meetup that's only going to be an hour and a half. So have a 5-minute conversation with them and say, look, we'd love to chat to you in a bit more detail. How about we do this over coffee or even a beer or a glass of wine sometime in the next few weeks? And a lot of people are very keen and up for that. And I think it's being about able to add value yourself as well. If you're going through a project, a lot of the time these people want to understand how you're going about it, and they can also impart a bit of knowledge on how they're going about it. So it's about being able to add a bit of value yourself as well to those conversations. I guess they'd be my main 3 tips.
Thanks, Carl. You already getting comments that it was very helpful. And now, Sean, the bar is raised, so now you have to top it up. Yeah, over to you.
That's tough. I might add on to that as well. So it might come after you've attended a couple of the similar session. I know doing a master's degree that part of a postgraduate course is not only about what you learn, but I think 50% of it are the connections that you build within that particular capability area. So if it's data science or an MBA, you want to sort of network with people and build those really solid connections. And you sort of see those connections throughout your career as well. And they tend to be long lasting. I guess one of the issues with that is that it is quite an expensive way to network. If you're looking at that as sort of the sole opportunity for postgraduate coursework. So I think meetups, after you've attended at least a couple of sessions, and there could also be like virtual sessions just like this, you might want to look at how you socialize outside of that. So within at least this art community, there's sort of chat and group functionality that allow you to have conversations that are much more specific to a few people. Or I've also typically seen WhatsApp being used as well. So I've got a couple of WhatsApp groups where we maintain sort of really good, long-lasting relationships with other people. And it's also meeting outside of work as well. So you're able to at least develop sort of long-lasting friendships. That's what I wanted to add, I guess. The other aspect to that as well is these events create presentation opportunities. So what's sort of a challenge being, you know, data engineer or data scientist is that they are very technical roles, and it's constantly changing. So you have to become sort of more technical over time, because it's constant learning that you would do throughout your career. There's almost no break. And part of the opportunity that these events create is being able to speak and present. So you're able to develop some of the softer skills. That's really important to how you might communicate to the business for selling an idea, or describing a technical problem and getting business buy-in. So it is really putting yourself outside of your comfort zone, and you're talking with a group of like-minded professionals, but it'll allow you to sort of step into that zone, you know, present an idea. And a few of the meetups that I have attended, not everything's going to be useful, but there might be some gold nuggets along the way. So I think, you know, don't set the expectation on yourself that everything's going to be useful to everyone. That won't be the case. And then you'll be hopefully more comfortable in presenting those ideas.
Thanks, John. That's great. So if I may just summarize for the purpose of our audience, I think to Daniel's point, the authenticity, be authentic about how you present yourself, just be comfortable, casual, and just be yourself. Literally, I think that's what you meant, Daniel. Just whatever you fancy of a beer or a coffee, whatever, just feel comfortable. And I think don't kind of overkill it. I think that's what you're trying to say also, and Danielle, that just present yourself how you would present it to your friends. And I think that's come across much more professional, that you are an authentic person. You are not trying to present something that it's not there. And I think, Carl, your point was also very helpful, that prepare yourself and have some sort of a plan. You are going to an networking event. You potentially can see 10, 20 people that can help you some way or shape or form, or you also contribute to a greater good. So it's not just sort of a one-way relationship. Go with this sort of a thought in mind that I'm going there to add some values. And I think that can come across as something positive that people can relate, can communicate better, and they don't feel like this person just want to, as Carl, you mentioned, just want to grab something and go. Coming here to actually participate, collaborate, add value, and that way also you can present yourself and attract people that who is this person that is so helpful to others, and let's get to know them. And I think with Sean also, it was very important that with different, as you said, meetups and sort of opportunities, you might be able to actually present in those events. And it doesn't have to be something overly sort of complicated. It might be just 2 minutes, 5 minutes. You might have had an idea or an experience with a tool or a system or an algorithm or a modeling, and you think that it might be fascinating to your peers. So it doesn't have to be something, breakthrough that, a complicated discovery. So take it easy, just enjoy yourself, have fun, and maybe show your peers that they can actually dare and feel confident to come and present. And again, I think that's how you can present a very positive vibe around you that attracts more people. Back to our panelists, do you think that maybe, again, I go around, Danielle, Carl, Sean, in order. Do you think that that's going to summarize what you were trying to say, or do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, pretty much that's what's like very well summarized. And after Sean has given his point, I have something to add, that inspired me. So basically, there are 3 types of people that we will meet normally in a physical meetup context. And as Carl mentioned, you may run into any type of person. You may run into a technical peer, or you may run into like a business person who's more interested in how the technology has been applied to a specific industry. and you will have recruiters who will be sort of very interested in your whole career journey. So with these three people, you may present what they're actually sort of keen to see, because there are multiple aspects of yourself, like with everyone. And for technical people, they're more interested in transferable knowledge and transferable skills, where if I can learn something, or we can talk about something that can be applied to multiple industries, they'll be very excited, and then the conversation will go really warm, after an initial sort of high. And then the second type of people will be the business people. Like it's obviously smarter to not to talk about the technical details too much, and then just talk about sort of use cases where, okay, this piece of technology is very successful in this industry, and there are some not so successful cases, and what's wrong with that, and things like that. And with career, like nice people like Carl, they're very keen to share how they can help and things like that. So you can share your journey and share your question, like sort of like raise your question about how the market is going, and how I can plan my career better and things like that. And then the conversation would be very smooth as well. So that's my addition.
Thanks, Daniel. Over to you, Carl.
Yeah, I think everything you said there was exactly what I was trying to get across, which is great. And I think just in addition to what Daniel was saying, I can maybe kind of add a bit more meat to the bones around the recruitment piece. When you're speaking to recruiters, don't be afraid to kind of go into a bit of detail about your situation, what you might be looking for, even if it's not right now. And as you say, ask the questions about what the market's doing, and usually we should be able to give you that information, and that might help you make some decisions for your career and your future as well. And take some contact details. I know myself, and probably most recruiters out there, more than happy to have conversations outside of those meetups, whether that's over coffee or over the phone or whatever that might be. Just take some contact details, and we'd be happy to help you on that one as well.
Thanks, Carl. Sean, any thing else that you would like to add?
Yeah, to add on to Daniel's point as well, I think it was really good. And the other perspective that I gained was perhaps sort of learnt from a meetup that we attended, Ria, on data science. I think there was an investor there looking at different opportunities purely from a business perspective. And he was sort of talking to a few different people, sort of trying to grasp and understand the different algorithms. I went into sort of this technical understanding, and I was quite passionate about people analytics at the time, still am, and went into some detail, and I thought, wow, I had such a killer idea. He said, wow, that's fascinating. And then I think you started talking about behavioral finance. Then he went, holy shit. And then he sort of invited you, connected with you, and was really interesting to explore that idea. So I think there are investors within that as well. And I think particularly with the data engineering, data science space, we've got a few friends that are really trying to do their own startup. There's enormous growth in that sector. So they, you could either go down a professional career, or you could buddy up with someone, finding the right capabilities to look at your own startup. A friend of mine did a startup through Antler, and they are very selective with who they onboard, and they essentially go through an 8-week window and look at filtering at least 20% each time until they get to, a final 5 or 10 that they could invest, I think $100,000 into that startup for 10% apparently. So they're looking at a valuation of $1 million. But that's in Sydney, which is quite interesting. And I think Sydney as a tech precinct and sort of a startup hub is really starting to grow. So I think the other opportunity is investors within those sessions. If you have a good idea, don't be shy. Be careful of who you tell it to. Maybe don't tell them as much detail as I did. Otherwise, you don't necessarily have a marketable idea, but you might be able to network with people, and you might be able to find those really great opportunities.
Thanks, John. I think what you mentioned is also aligned what Daniel was saying, that don't go too much maybe into the technical side of this sort of a story, and more on the application of it. So how you can apply your knowledge on solving a business problem. I think that's ultimately everyone wants to hear from data science, from any professional. That yeah, I understand, R, Python, all of it. You've got a killing GitHub profile and a repository, and you've done thousands of Kaggle. But now I am putting this question in front of you. Can you come up with a good strategic problem solving, skill that you can actually add value? And I think that's the core of a message of, I guess, and Danielle and Sean in this one. And Sean, I must tell that you are very humble. It was a very great idea. And I remember you got a lot of attention in that session. But I guess it was maybe the idea that I presented was a bit more interested, just because it was a little bit different. Because everyone, it was a data science meetup, and it was more around, the technical side of it. So maybe it was just a little bit of a different topic. Otherwise, I remember that your idea was amazing as well, and still is. And you've kind of approached it in some way, shape, or form. Maybe we can have some session on it later on in the art community as well. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you, Trey, is that when we talk about networking, we talk a lot about before getting maybe a job, or if it's mainly around, getting in an opportunity. But what if you are already in an organization, you are already working? How are you networking, and how you're building your professional network? So when you are moving to your next sort of a gig and next opportunity, you actually have a very strong network behind you that you can go and tap onto them and get a reference, or you might start in a sort of a new type of work that you may need to go back to your peer and say, look, I've got this job, it's a little bit different than what I used to do. I may need to actually bounce back some idea and maybe polish my skills here and there. So Daniel, we start from you again.
Okay, cool. Can everyone hear me? Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So I'll repeat your question, Huria. So if I understood correctly, you're talking about how we can benefit from the networking that we built over time for future career development. Yeah. So it's a very good question. I guess one of the main challenge that I personally have with networking is the dropout rate. So what I call dropout rate is not a very nice term, but basically to keep in touch with everyone that you have networked with, it's quite challenging. And I admit that I can do much better than I have done, and I'm still improving on that constantly. The point of networking is obviously in the professional context. It's to sort of complement what you already know, and different people has different aspects of knowledge when it comes to technical skills or industry skills, or they may know some opportunity comes up and you don't know. So the whole sort of networking gist is that everyone can share some information that might not be useful immediately for yourself, but maybe sort of beneficial for other people. And so I remember getting to a new job and then having to go back to some field as expert in some specific tools or something like that, just because I know that this guy knows a lot about this, and I'm now using it. So I can sort of come back and say, hey, how's it going? And I need your help on this tool and things like that. And the same applies to industry, and also just be a friend of who you're networking with, and then go out without any sort of specific purpose in mind. You just hang out with them and checking out how you can help them, for example. And then over time, you may surprise yourself that, you've built a very good network, and where you can help people and people can help you as well. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Daniel. That was great. Thank you. Carl, over to you.
Yeah, there's quite a few ways in which kind of building your network and how it can help you in the future is super important. I think that first and foremost, obviously the more people you know in the future, I think it's one of those, it can help you not only from career development where you might be able to find roles for it, but also if you're a hiring manager in the future, if you've got a network of hundreds of people that and there might be a lot of people in there with the right skill set that you can just reach out to, then you can put people like myself out the job and recruit your own people. So that's super important. But then also I think what Daniel was talking about, when you're doing big projects and when you're doing these things, if you have a network of people, have done something similar in the past, similar industry, you can reach out to them. Most people are more than happy to help and give advice, which is really good. And I think what Daniel was saying about the drop-off rate is very true. It's so hard to keep in touch. If you meet, even if it's just 20 people per meetup that you actually speak to, and then you've been to 4 or 5 meetups in a year, that's over 100 people in a year. And if you've been doing this for a few years now, there's lots of people there that could potentially drop off. And I guess a tip around that, and what I do, but I guess it is my job to have a network, is I actually hold a lot of this information in something like Google Sheets or Excel. And these are people that I've spoken to. I know where they are, who they work for, what industries they're in, what sort of projects they've done, what sort of technology they've worked in, when I've last spoken to them. And I've been in Australia now just 2 years, actually 2 years last week. And during that time, I've managed to build up a network of, I think, 300-400 people. And I try and speak to most of those at least once every 3 to 4 or 5 months. And there'll be some that, yes, I network with a bit more, and I might go for coffees with them every 3 or 4, every 6 months, however long that might be. But that's a really good tip, I think. And it's not for everyone. You don't need to do it, but it can help you if you do want to lower that drop-off rate. Maybe just record the information somewhere, and that way it can really help you, especially then in the future you're doing a project and it's on AWS. Oh, I've spoken to 20 people in the last year that have all used that technology and who can help me out in that space. So that's, I think, yeah, quite important as well. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Carl. It's really helping. And also, by the way, happy anniversary.
Thank you very much. No, I love it here. I hope I can stay for a lot longer.
Thanks, Carl. Sean, over to you.
Yeah, I guess in a professional setting, one of the things that I have found quite useful is an idea of communities of practice. So if you have a central data analytics team, I think that's a really important aspect to creating a data-driven, sort of enabled organization. And the communities of practice is a way to sort of showcase different products and ideas internally within the organization. Every organization that I've been in sort of had that sort of concept. Here where I currently work, we've been able to grow it from about 20 people late last year to now over 100. So there's really appetite for people attending those types of events. And there are a number of different ideas, sort of networking that sparks from that internally. So communities of practice, I think, is a great idea. Another sort of mechanism is sort of getting people really enabled with the technology, and that helps to build some really solid business relationships. So part of that is looking at, if it is a central team and a hub and spoke type of model, knowing that you might actually be restricted as a central team in how you deliver things because you've only got 10 or so people. But utilizing a hub and spoke model, you could look at identifying some technical expertise within the business, and you could start to show them the databases, the different data analysis tools and the techniques, maybe some programming languages, might be basic SQL to begin with, And then, of course, ways to consume that. So if you've got an enterprise tool like Power BI, Tableau, Looker, Yellowfin, you can introduce all of that and slowly start to build that capability. So at first, you might be doing some of the work, but over time, you might be able to get to a self-sufficient capability within the business as well. And I think that's important because if you're building a data lake type of capability, it tends to turn into a swamp, or it can be quite siloed if you don't allow for some really good communication. And through that communication and both of those mechanisms, it's a really good way to network with individuals across the business.
Thanks, Sean. I think, Sean, I also posed the question, ideas on networking plan, starting a new role. I think that's also very important and quite tricky when you start a new role to understand, your sort of peers in your organization, and also within your sort of a major and your space and a specialization. So then that way, as Danielle mentioned, you may meet, 100, 200 people, but over the time, I think what you're doing, Danielle, I wouldn't call it, dropout. It's more maybe you are shortlisting your network, and you are more focusing on the group that are more relevant, whether to your career or to your specialization, or to your interests simply. And that way you are growing it, and it can be like the core of your network, and it's kind of grow from there. And I think the other point that kind of crossed my mind was that communities such as ART is a great opportunity to bring your network in, and then that way you can kind of flourish in your relationship. And over the time, even if you are not directly talking to your network, there are still other people to engage them and kind of keep them relevant to the topic and to your area of interest. So when you decide to, or when it's the right time for you to go and reconnect or reignite the relationship, you can have that sort of a base that we've been in touch, in the art, similar to LinkedIn. We've been hearing each other's comments, or we've been posting or commenting on each other's work, and just might be good to have a catch up, or have a coffee, as Carl said, or a drink, or however you usually do your socializing. But I think kind of summarize all these great tips, is that we have a plan. So who you want to communicate, you want to network, maybe segment them. I think that's what you mentioned, Carl, that you have a sort of a tracker wherever you track your group of networks. So that for example, when was the last time you caught up with these these group of people? And if it's over a year, do you actually want to review that relationship? And do you think that is still, worthwhile continuing that, or it can be just a sort of a passive sitting in a LinkedIn every now and then, just say hello? Or you actually want to get it to a point that, you might have an active group that you can bounce back ideas and do further collaboration. So what's the purpose? And I think, again, goes back to our initial conversation, that have a plan and prepare, like Carl mentioned, prepare yourself when you go to a networking. It's the same. What's your plan and what's your goal of networking with other people? I think we are almost towards the end of the session. So I'm just gonna post it as an open question, or maybe just a sort of a last tip for this 30-day challenge in general, and also specifically to the networking. So if we want to bring the 4 weeks together and kind of give our audience and our arts community members few tips that they can have takeaway from this session, if they've missed any of the previous session, still be able to get some value. Daniel, what would be your, let's say, top 2-3 tips?
Okay, so my top 2 and 3 tips. The first tip I can think of is getting out of your comfort zone and then grow. So it can be professionally grow, and it could be grow in networking. And these two are not exclusive, like mutually exclusive. They are kind of like enhancing each other, I would say. And also the second tip would be in a career growth context, I would say your technical skills is important, and as important as the technical skills would be the skills for you to articulate your value on top of your technical skills. That includes your industry experience and explaining them how your skills can be transferred to that particular environment to solve their problems, and how you can bring value to the new role or whatever you're going for. And the third part, the third tip, I would say that try to network as much as you can. Of course, there's a balance there, but basically, the power of networking may surprise you one day if you do it, constantly and enthusiastically. And that's it.
Thanks, Daniel. That was very interesting. The power of networking. That's definitely a good takeaway for me. That sometimes networking is not easy, and when you, as you mentioned, you have to get out of your comfort zone to be able to go out and approach other people, total stranger that you've never met, and now you want to sort of create a good first impression. So it is it's hard to actually go out and talk, and especially if you are an introvert, or by nature you are quite private, you don't like to talk about things, so it can be also more difficult. But as you mentioned, it pays off at some point when you get out of your comfort zone, you go out, talk to more people. I think at the minimum you're gonna improve and you're gonna develop your own personal skill. If doesn't bring you anything, at least it's just gonna be self-improvement, I think.
Yes, exactly. And also the power of, like, I want to share a short story about the power of networking. So it's not unusual for someone to, post in LinkedIn and say, due to COVID, my role has been made redundant, but I have such and such skills, and I'm happy to work such and such. And then a lot of the recruiters and also those who are in the company but trying to expand their team, they will reach out, and it's not unusual for you to see, like, after 2 weeks or something, they have posted another post and saying, I thank LinkedIn for this powerful network. And when you post things like that, you may have 500 peers in your LinkedIn connections, but then this whole networking thing actually expands when people repost, and people repost again, and people repost again, and your reach is actually beyond your imagination. So yeah, the power of networking is really incredible, and I would definitely recommend networking exercise and plan networking as accelerate as possible.
Thanks, Daniel. That was great. Carl, over to you.
Yeah, no, fantastic, Daniel. I think, yeah, my main three tips over the space of this 30 days, I think to kind of help get to where you want to in your career, I think first and foremost is marketing yourself in the right way. Whether that's kind of writing a good CV, making sure it's checked up by recruiters like myself, or even hiring managers who know what to look for, making sure you've got the right technology experience on there, going into the detail around the projects, the numbers, the actual tech stacks you've used, I think it's super important. But making sure that's on LinkedIn as well, as we keep saying, LinkedIn is so powerful now. Making sure that is up to date, and kind of you are marketing yourself in the right way there, super important. I think next is that self-improvement piece. We keep talking about the technology and kind of what you can do to upskill yourself. I think look at what's being used in the market, look at the new technology that's coming out, look at what a lot of these job descriptions you're seeing are looking for, and seeing if you can upskill in that area. See if you can go on courses. I know there's lots of people out there at the moment where they're putting on cheap courses, especially during COVID. So really important to keep upskilling yourself. And then I think, thirdly, what we've talked about today, and what Daniel said, the power of network is is massive. I think it's one of those things where if you're able to kind of build out your network, and as we were talking about, trying to maybe keep track of who you know, who you speak to people regularly. It could happen once, but even that once could be the perfect job opportunity for you. Or you could fill an opportunity with someone in your network and give them that opportunity of a lifetime. I think the power of networking and building that out and keeping track of it is really important. And I think, yeah, they'd be my main 3 ones.
Thanks, Carl. And you, Sean, please.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's been covered, which is great. I guess to add on to it is that if you're here in Australia, the sense of humor, it tends to be a little bit more down to earth. I think it's also important to be authentic as well. So as you're building out your brand, which I think is really helpful to building a good network, you might have a bad day, maybe talk about some of the elements that might have frustrated you. It is a good way to vent on LinkedIn potentially, so long as you're careful. One of the posts that I did recently talked about effective communication in business analysis because I was having a tough day in getting some requirements. And that was a good release for me. And there are a lot of people that resonated with that, and a few people that reached out to me as well. So I think the ability to look at storytelling, being authentic within that process, and understand who your connections are. And most of my connections here are here in Australia. So the sense of humor tends to be a bit more down to earth. That's a really good way to sort of get people to respond to what you're doing in mostly a positive way, because everyone else has usually experienced that at some time. And that's also a good way for people to offer their insights and their recommendations to improving that situation as well. So you're getting a lot out of that process. And not only that, you're building some really good connections or people that you could work with in the future.
Thanks, John. And maybe just my 2 cents on this. I think if you can think of your 30 seconds elevator pitch, if you want to introduce yourself in 30 seconds, what are the highlight of your career, your personality, your life that you want to bring it into someone's attention, so then they get excited to get to know you more. And as we mentioned here, now they ask for that coffee catch up or a message in LinkedIn. So maybe a good sort of a takeaway, if you can go and think about it, that how can you present yourself in less than a minute that it can be attractive and informative. So with saying that, I'd just like to thank our great panelists, Daniel, Carl, Sean. Thank you so much for making time. And also, Carl, thank you so much for organizing it and bringing this great topic into everyone's attention. I thoroughly enjoyed, coming every week and sharing ideas and hearing your great tips and, information and very practical sort of sessions we had. So I hope that everyone had some sort of a takeaways. Please feel free to continue this conversation in our community. Post your questions, and I'm sure that our panelists be more than happy to continue the conversation. And we are here to help each other and empower each other. With saying that, just wanted to thank you again, and have a great afternoon, and look forward to our future sessions.
Thank you, Aurea.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. See you later.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thanks. Bye.